Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to this live broadcast from the IMAN Center in Kirkland. We begin our program here on the 7th of Muharram, the year 1442 AH, August 26, 2020, with the recitation of the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الذين آتيناهم الكتاب يتلونه حق تلاوته أولئك يؤمنون به ومن يكفر به فأولئك هم الخاسرون يا بني إسرائيل اذكروا نعمتي التي أنعمت عليكم وأني فضلتكم على العالمين واتقوا يوما لا تجزي نفس عن نفس شيئا ولا يقبل منها عدل ولا تنفعها شفاعة ولا هم ينصرون وإذ ابتلى إبراهيم ربه بكلمات فأتمهن قال إني جاعلك للناس إماما قال ومن ذريتي قال لا ينال عهد الظالمين صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 121 to 124. In the name of God, the Lord of mercy, the giver of mercy. Those to whom we have given the scripture, who follow it as it deserves, are the ones who truly believe in it. Those who deny its truth will be the losers. Children of Israel, remember how I blessed you and favored you over other people? And beware of a day when no soul can stand in for another. No compensation will be accepted from it, nor intercession be of use to it, nor will anyone be helped. When Abraham's Lord tested him with certain commandments, which he fulfilled, he said, I will make you a leader of the people. Abraham asked, and will you make leaders from my descendants too? God answered, my pledge does not hold for those who do evil. Sadaqallahul Aliyyul Azim.
We continue our program on this seventh day of Muharram in the year 1442 AH, 26th of August, Wednesday, 2020. Thank you all for joining, and my special thanks to all those who have responded to our request for recordings of Noha and Marthia as we remember the martyrs of Karbala. The eve of 8th of Muharram is customary for us to remember Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam, and we're very pleased to have Professor Tahir Hussain share the poetry he has written in honor of Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam. The poetry is recited in Urdu, but you will see the English translation alongside it. Sallu ala Nabi.
Marcia regarding Shahadat of Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam. बेताब जब आतश से बहुत तश्नगां हुए, मशकीज़ले के ज़ादे हैदर आयां हुए। مختل کی سمت شیر نیستاں رواں ہوئے، میدان سے فوج شام کے لشکر نہاں ہوئے، لشکر کے فرد نہر سے مفقود ہو گئے، قدغن کے حکم آپ پہ بے سود ہو گئے، دریا پہ دو فشاں تھا علمدار کا علم، جرت کا ایک نشاں تھا علمدار کا علم، خیبر کی داستاں تھا علمدار کا علم، تشنا لبوں کی جاں تھا علمدار کا علم، خیبر کا در اکھاڑ کے جیسے علی چلے، خیبر کا در اکھاڑ کے جیسے علی چلے، یوں مشک بھر کے نہر سے ابن ولی چلے، آئیں پے نبرد یہ ہمت نہ تھی کہیں، آئیں پے نبرد یہ ہمت نہ تھی کہیں، حائل ہوں ان کی راہ میں جرت نہ تھی کہیں، اس شیر سے لڑائی کی قدرت نہ تھی کہیں، عباس سے نبرد کی حسرت نہ تھی کہیں، چھپ چھپ کے ہر طرف سے چلانے لگے وہ تیر، چھپ چھپ کے ہر طرف سے چلانے لگے وہ تیر، مشکیزے کو نشانہ بنانے لگے وہ تیر، مشکیزے کو نشانہ بنانے لگے وہ تیر، تیروں کی یورشوں کو علمدار سہ گیا، تیروں کی یورشوں کو علمدار سہ گیا، بے سود پھر بھی کار علمدار شہ گیا، بے سود پھر بھی کار علمدار شہ گیا، ایک تیر مشق میں لگا سب آب بہہ گیا، ایک تیر مشق میں لگا سب آب بہہ گیا، پیاسوں کا خواب تشنہ تعبیر رہ گیا، پیاسوں کا خواب تشنہ تعبیر رہ گیا، ناوک لگا جو آنکھ میں لاچار ہو گئے، نزدیک سے جری پہ کئی وار ہو گئے، سر پر لگا جو گرز تو لاچار ہو گئے، سر پر لگا جو گرز تو لاچار ہو گئے، ٹھنڈا علم ہوا تو دل افگار ہو گئے، ٹھنڈا علم ہوا تو دل افگار ہو گئے، بازو کٹے تو جعفر تیار ہو گئے، بازو کٹے تو جعفر تیار ہو گئے، آئے حسین پاس تو بیدار ہو گئے، آئے حسین پاس تو بیدار ہو گئے، مولا کو بھائی کہہ کے سوئے آسماں گئے، مولا کو بھائی کہہ کے سوئے آسماں گئے، لکھ کر وفا کی خون سے وہ داستاں گئے، لکھ کر وفا کی خون سے وہ داستاں گئے، ایک شور تھا کہ شہ کا علمدار مر گیا، اہل حرم کا مونس و غمخوار مر گیا، مولائے کائنات کا دلدار مر گیا، مولائے کائنات کا دلدار مر گیا، تشنا لبوں کی فوج کا سالار مر گیا، تشنا لبوں کی فوج کا سالار مر گیا، تیغ و سنا کی زد پہ شہ مشرقین تھے، تیغ و سنا کی زد پہ شہ مشرقین تھے، اب کربلا کے بن میں اکیلے حسین تھے، اب کربلا کے بن میں اکیلے حسین تھے، اب کربلا کے بن میں اکیلے حسین تھے، صلوات۔
Very moving poetry there from Professor Tahir Hussain. Now we will continue here with the recitation of another marthia from Brother Mansoor, Ali and Hamza.
بر محمد آل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد، فوج آدھا میں تلاحتم ہے کہ شیر آتا ہے، نام عباس ہے جس کا وہ دلیر آتا ہے، زندگی سے غم نوشاہ میں سیر آتا ہے، شیر کے آنے میں اب کچھ نہیں دیر آتا ہے، فوج پر فوج رسالے پا رسالہ ہوگا، یہ زمین کیا ہے زمانہ تہو بالا ہوگا، فوجیں وہاں تو سب درہم و برہم تھی، سپاہ ازلم بحر غم میں یہاں ڈوبے تھے، شہنشاہ امم عرض کرتا تھا بسد عز یہ سقائے حرم، مشق یہ بالی سکینہ کی ہے، اے بحر کرم، دیکھوں غش اس کو کہاں سے، یہ جگر لاؤں میں حکم گر ہو تو ابھی نیر سے بھر لاؤں میں فوجیں، بولے حضرت کے ہوئی مدت آرام تمام، عصر تک آج ہیں سب زیست کے ایام تمام، مجھ کو دیکھو کہ میرے سب ہوئے گلفام تمام، تم ادھر کو گئے یا میرا ہوا کام تمام، موت ہے پھر جو نہ سینے میں جگر ہوئے گا، آپ کے ساتھ ہمارا بھی سفر ہوئے گا، فوجیں ہم پہ عباس علی وقت ہے تنہائی کا، ہاتھ پکڑو کے سہارا ہو تمہیں بھائی کا، عزم موقوف کرو مار کا آرائی کا، خون میں ڈوبو گے یہ انجام ہے سقائی کا، نہر فردوس پہ منظور ہے جانا تم کو، خوب ہاتھ آ گیا پانی کا بہانا تم کو، فوجیں بولے عباس دلاور کے بہے خون تو بہے، کچھ تردد نہیں یہ سر تن پر رہے یا نہ رہے، سہل ہے زخموں کی ایزا جو نمک خار سہے مجھ کو پانی نہ پلایا یہ سکینہ نہ کہے چاہ پھر کیسی تنو سرکار جو ہم دھیان کریں لاکھ جانے ہو تو اس پیاس پر قربان کریں اے فوج آدم تلا تم ہے کہ شیر آتا ہے بر محمد آل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد.
Abul Fazl Abbas holds a very special place in all our hearts. So we have a little bit of a protracted Mathia program. I would like to request this is Iqbal Rizvi to offer a Mathia in honor of Hazrat Abbas.
صلوات بر محمد وآل محمد اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد. حضرت عباس کی شان میں رباعیاں حاضر ہیں. جمال عشق و محبت کا آئینہ عباس جمال عشق و محبت کا آئینہ عباس کمال عزم و عمل پے کرے وفا عباس لب فرات وہ جوہر دکھا دیے تو نے لب فرات وہ جوہر دکھا دیے تو نے علی کی روح پکاری علی کی روح پکاری کہ مرحبا عباس جمال عشق و محبت کا آئینہ عباس. صلوات محمد و آل محمد اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد. حضرت عباس شاہ لافتہ کے شیر ہیں حضرت عباس شاہ لافتہ کے شیر ہیں خیبر و خندق کے وہ یہ کربلا کے شیر ہیں کیوں نہ ہو یہ ہر جنگ میں یہ مثل ہے در کامیاب کیوں نہ ہو ہر جنگ میں یہ مثل ہے در کامیاب وہ خدا کے شیر یہ شیر خدا کے شیر ہیں وہ خدا کے شیر یہ شیر خدا کے شیر ہیں حضرت عباس شاہ لافتہ کے شیر ہیں. صلوات پر محمد و آل محمد.
Thank you very much, Professor Tahir, Brother Mansoor, Ali Hamza, and also Brother Iqbal Rizvi. Brother Iqbal Rizvi was cutting a little too short. I'm sorry, the video got a little kind of messed up initially, but we were able to rescue it, alhamdulillah. I also appreciate the flexibility of our speaker, Sayyid Hassan Rizvi, to be able to accommodate the extra Marthia reciters today. And now I request him to address us for tonight. Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad Salawat.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
والصلاة والسلام التحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد. Mu'minin, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We continue our series entitled From Muslim to Mu'min. We're trying to figure out ways of strengthening our Iman by re-examining our aqa'id, our beliefs, and trying to prove things like Tawheed without having to seek recourse to the Quran or the Hadith, the Sunnah and narrations of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And hopefully in doing so, we would have relieved ourselves of some of the doubts that have permeated and penetrated into our souls. For this is what we saw may have led to our identity crisis. Because on one hand, we believe in God and the prophets, the Day of Judgment and everything, but on the other hand, we end up having this weakness in practice and action. After proving in the previous nights that there is at least one, many more that we haven't gone through, but at least one rational proof for God's existence, we then took a look at some of the objections that certain atheists may raise. So the first one that we took a look at was the idea of the Big Bang Theory. Some atheists would say, okay, we have the Big Bang, so doesn't that explain a cause for existence? Why does it have to be God? So the first thing we did is we examined that there's two misconceptions first that sometimes Muslims have and also an atheistic scientist. We said that one, the Big Bang is not some sort of explosion at the beginning of the universe. And the second misconception is that when we talk about the Big Bang, it's not meant to explain the beginning of all creation, of everything. It's meant to only describe what happens after the universe begins, right? Once time and matter and space finally start, then you are allowed to have the Big Bang. And in fact, this then showed us that the Big Bang actually indicates that there must be somebody keeping things in line, through the physical laws of the universe and the cosmological principle, which states that scientists require and must have this idea that all of these physical laws must play fair with scientists in order for them to go ahead and figure out what is going on at the beginning of time. Then we gave another objection. We examined that about random creation, saying that, okay, well, maybe forget the Big Bang. What if all this stuff just happened randomly? And we said that, it's a ridiculous notion because you need somebody to pick a universe randomly out of a hat. So you would need some sort of powerful being that would exist before all the universes, the possible universes existed. So both of these ideas we tossed down the drain. There's two other issues left over before we end our discussion on Tawheed. The first is examining the idea of polytheism, meaning if somebody, let's say, agrees, okay, fine, we believe that there was a creator, a designer, some powerful being of the universe, okay, but how do we know it's only one? Why do you monotheists, Jews, Christians, Muslims, for example, why should we trust you and your belief in one God when there's tons of other religions who are polytheistic in nature that say that there are many gods? Or, as we'll examine, Bertrand Russell's famous objection where he said, well, okay, you can prove to me one God, but where did that God come from? Who created that God? So we'll have to examine that. And then the final part of our discussion tonight will be about the practical implications, meaning how do we practically apply Tawheed? Is it just something theoretical that we prove that's in a philosophy or a theology book? Or is it something that once we understand, we can apply in everyday life so that it shows up as actions. It's not just something that we, think about in our mind, we philosophize over, but it's actually something that can help us out when we are facing an identity crisis. So this will be our discussion for tonight before we move on to the Masa'ib of Abu Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
So our first discussion then is about polytheism, right? Now, some, when they attack the belief of monotheism, they can do it in very different ways. But some of them say, look, first of all, you have to disprove that there are 2 gods. But then after that, you have to disprove that there's going to be 3 gods. Then you also have to disprove 4 gods, and then 10 gods, and then 1,000. They say that, you are going to be unable to do this because you'll be stuck going on towards infinity. You'll never be able to show us why, because we can keep going on and keep saying, well, why not 1,001 gods, etc. So many will attack us and say that, therefore, you can have infinite gods and you can never disprove that. So monotheism becomes, something that is unprovable. Our response is like this. All we have to do is show rational evidence from various different perspectives and approaches that there can only be one God. And that would automatically dismiss the idea that there can be 2, 3, or anything, right? When we say that there's one, or disprove at least 2, then that will automatically disprove 2 plus. So we don't have to go and disprove every single additional number. That's ridiculous, right? Okay. So let's look at the first idea of how to examine this question. One way is this. They'll say, okay, and this is Bertrand Russell, his famous response and his objection. They'll say, if God is the creator, the designer, he's all powerful, all knowing, etc. Okay, let's say we accept that. Well, if he's the cause for everything in the universe in existence, and he's this great, powerful being, we can easily ask, well, who caused him? Who caused God? Who brought God into existence? And if you say that, no, God just was there all the time, they say you're begging the question. This is unfair because, as Bertrand Russell will say, you theists and monotheists will say that everything needs a cause. Everything needs a creator. So then therefore God should have a creator too. Otherwise you're being absurd. You're begging the question and you're being unfair here. And this concern actually led him away from, he was originally raised as a Christian. He brought this concern to his religious cleric and they were unable to answer it, unfortunately. Now, if only that cleric, I'm surprised why he couldn't answer, if only that cleric had studied just, a few lines of philosophy, they would realize that Bertrand Russell, or anybody who brings up this objection, it's an absurd objection, right? Because here's what they have claimed, right? Let's go to their objection. The objection is as follows, right? The objection is based on the idea that they think we claim that everything has a cause. Because if we say everything has a cause, then included within everything would be God, right? And then they say, well, therefore God needs a cause, and then you can go on till infinity. That's ridiculous, so they throw it away. So our response, or at least one of our responses, there's many, but one is simple. We say that, look, this claim above, that's not what we say at all. We do not say no logical individual, no philosopher, if they've ever bothered to read any of our books, ever claims anything like this. What we do say is that every effect needs a cause. Now that's a much different statement. Why? Because now when we take into consideration the idea of God, we don't consider God to be an effect. We say, what is God? He is an uncaused being. Or as they term in philosophy, a necessary existent. A being that doesn't need anybody else to put it there. Now, they might reply again and say, well, that's not fair. Why do you get to say that? How can you make such a claim that you need this uncaused being, right? Isn't it the same thing? Well, okay, fine. Let's see if we can establish that. So now, I'm going to give an analogy here. Let's say we are looking at a relay race, right? And in a relay race, you see, right, this person over here, he's holding the baton. And let's call this person runner number 3. So runner number 3, we see as the baton. We can stop the runner in the middle of the race, right? And say, Mr. or number 3, where'd you get the baton from? And they can either give us two answers, right? They can say, well, I had it in the beginning, or they can say, well, I got it from somebody else. Now, since they're number three, that would indicate to us that, okay, they got it from somebody else. Who gave it to them? We go back and we find out, though, there was a number two. So this number two, they're the one who, they have the baton, and they're the one who passed it on to number three. We can ask this runner, number two, the same question. Say, number two, where did you get the baton from? Again, two possible responses. Either they say, I always had it, or they say somebody else gave it to me. We can keep asking this, however many numbers you want to create. We can ask this forever. But the issue is this. We, in order for the relay race to occur, will always go back to number one. And that number one person will say, you know what? I didn't get the baton from anybody else. I had it from the beginning. I'm the one who started the race off. I had the baton in my hand. I had control over it, and I'm the one who gave it to everybody else. In order for number 15 or 16 in the race to have it, they needed me to exist first. I had to be in the race first. Otherwise, nobody would have it at all. So our response to, when we were saying before, how do you know that it has to be somebody in the beginning, is say that, look, when we look in the universe right now, we see that you and I exist. We see atoms existing, planets existing. All of these things didn't come out of nowhere. They required something else. How far back can we go? Can we go back infinitely? No, we can't go infinitely, because if we go back all the way, then none of this ever would have happened. You need one thing, definitely, at the beginning, which has the baton. Or in our terms, what we're claiming here, based on logical reasoning, without referring to the Quran or Hadith or anything like that, is that we need somebody at the beginning, which we call God, or the necessary being, to basically possess the quality of existence. God has existence in his hand, and he's the one who's able to start everything off. Otherwise, nothing would ever come into existence. This is how we say you have to have at least one thing in the beginning. And to avoid this idea of going on infinite, in philosophy, you call this avoiding an infinite regression, right? This is what we have to avoid, because this is something which is impossible, right? An infinite regression, or specifically an infinite regression of causes. It's got to start off somewhere. Otherwise, it won't be able to occur right now at all. Since we can see right now that there are things that exist, that must mean something in the beginning was able to start it off because it possessed the quality by itself. So this would be our response to anybody, a response to anyone who says something needs a cause or everything needs a cause. No. Only things which are effects need a cause. You have to have one thing at the beginning of the chain, which is your uncaused cause, your necessary being, which possesses existence and gives it to every single other dependent being and effect in all of existence. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Okay. Now they say, okay, fine. Let's say we accept that. You've got to have this uncaused cause in the beginning. No problem. But let's say you have God in the beginning over here, and then, let's say the Big Bang occurs, for example, and then you have all the other things that occur throughout time in existence, right? I don't want to write everything out, right? And then over here's 2020. So somebody might say, okay, fine. We believe. Sure, there's a God there. No problem. Uncaused cause, necessary being, whatever you want to say. But why can't there be God number two over here that also had an effect on the Big Bang, right? And then again, until you go to number infinity, etc. Why is that the case? Why do you only have to have one? This is the next thing that we have to respond to. So same way we said before, all we have to do is disprove that there's two, and then that'll automatically disprove that there's going to be, more than two. So all we're going to do focus on is that whether there can be two gods or not. Okay. Now some of you may be offended by me writing, God number one and God number two like this. It might be slightly blasphemous. Again, we're trying to have an educational discussion. So just in case some people get sensitive, I'll write it with a lowercase g, right? And we'll do, all right, we'll do God A as green, right? So it's understood, right? This God A is green, or lowercase g God. And then we'll have another one here that's God B, lowercase g, which is red. Again, to avoid any sort of blasphemous understandings over here, right? Okay, now, how do we know that there's only going to be one, that there can only be one? Well, let's examine this part right here. Let's go right to the beginning of the creation of everything, right? Right before the Big Bang. Let's say God A, right, is, again, before everything's created, God A says, you know what? I want to make existence. I want to make a universe. I want to make galaxies. I want to make human beings. I'm all powerful. I can go ahead and do that. But let's say God B comes and decides, you know what? I don't want that. I'm also all powerful, so I'm going to stop you. So now God A and God B are basically fighting in this moment over here to see who basically wins out. The same sort of things you see in, Greek and Roman discussions about gods, quote unquote, fighting it out. If we're saying here that God A and God B are the same thing, they're equally powerful, knowledgeable, etc., then who exactly would win here? There is no God that would win, and nothing would actually take place. One God would try to create, the other God would come and cancel and negate that because they're equally powerful, right? So there would be no creation at all. And this is, it seems like what Allah alludes to in the Quran as well. Allah, many times in the Quran, gives us these sort of logical and rational arguments. So this is in Surah Al-Anbiya, chapter 21, verse 22, where Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, لَوْ كَانَ فِيهِمَا آلِهَةٌ إِلَّا اللَّهِ لَفَسَدَتَا. If there had been other gods besides or next to or alongside Allah, na'udhu billah, then there'd be chaos, right? How would anything happen? You would see things popping in and out of existence, right? You wouldn't see an orderly universe happening. One of the proofs that many have used for the fact that there has to be one God is that, look, right now, we only see one system of cause and effect. We only see one way that, let's say, what we mentioned before for our argument by design, right? When you plant an apple seed, you get an apple tree. You plant a orange seed, you get an orange tree, right? When, when there's a fire, it burns. When there's a water, it, puts the fire out or it cools. We see one single system of how everything works. We don't see chaos. We don't see things spontaneously changing. But we can imagine that if there were more than one God, even two gods, then that other God, if he was equally as powerful, could come in any point that he wanted to, right? And then say, I want to change a rule here. I'm going to change a rule here. And they'd be fighting it out. But we don't see that. We see one unified system here, which shows a rational individual that only one person must be designing that. And many of you who, let's say, have worked, again, in a corporate office or any sort of place of business before or as managers, you know that when there's one person sitting at top, then there's a sort of, one sort of standard procedure that's all throughout the company or the project. But if you have multiple people putting in their own ideas and their own thoughts, then there's going to be a bunch of chaos, right? If everybody has equal power and they all have equal say on a board, then you won't get anything done. One manager will come in and say, you know what, I want the when you print out your reports, I want the font to be, font 14. The next manager will come the next day and say, no font 14, I want it to be font 24. And then it'll keep changing over and over again. But we don't see that. You see one specific set of guidelines in existence. So this shows any rational individual that only one God would exist. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Now, there's another response here, another objection. And somebody may say, Hassan, that's great. But why are you assuming that God A and God B will disagree? What if God A and God B are on the same page? They're best buddies. They'll agree all the time. So God A says, you know what? I want to create a universe. I'm sorry, this shouldn't have been erased. There we go, yeah. So God A says, you know what? I want to create a universe. And God B says, okay, I agree. You go ahead and do it. I'm not going to argue with you. And anytime God A wants to do something, right? Create a planet, create humans, create jinn, whatever it is, God B says, you know what? I have the power to stop it, but I won't. I agree with what you're doing, so I'll let you do it. Or maybe they work together, right? Maybe both of them, God A says, okay, I'll do the Big Bang and you handle, these laws. You do jinn, I'll take care of humans. It's teamwork. They work together. Isn't that possible? Why can't there be two gods working together? Again, lowercase g gods, don't attack me, right? I'm not trying to be blasphemous here. Why is that impossible now? What's the issue here? So this is what we have to now respond to. So this is going to be slightly more philosophical than before, so just bear with me here. Okay. Let's remind ourselves how a monotheist defines God, or how anybody would really define a God. We're saying that they're all powerful, all knowledgeable, infinite, no limitations, right? Now, you can think of all these different qualities for God. So let's say, whatever, God A has these various qualities, right? X, Y, Z, A, B, C, whatever, till however you want to go. So this God A possesses all these qualities, right? X, Y, Z, A, B, C, etc. Now, in order for God B to also be a God, then God B must also possess, the same qualities, right? So God B also has to have X and Y and Z and A and B and C, right? So they're going to have the same qualities if they're both going to be considered gods. Because if, let's say, there's one extra quality here, right? Let's say God A has a special quality called, let's say A plus, right? A very powerful quality. But let's say God B doesn't have that. Then that automatically means that this God A is more powerful than God B. So that means they're not equal anymore. But that is not what we said. We said they're two equal ones. So this is outside the argument here. The person saying, no, they both have to be equal in everything. Okay, fine. So then we'd have to assume that both of them have this A and A plus as well. That means every single quality needs to be the same. Now, you tell me, if you have two items, every single thing is exactly the same, then the question is, what's the difference? Even if you have, let's say, identical twins. Let me write that down, right? If you have, identical twins, they're all the same. Let's say they speak at the same time, exact same DNA, exact same structure, nothing different about them. At the very least, what you can say is, well, this twin only can occupy this part of space, whereas this twin over here occupies a different space. So they can never share the same space. That's what differentiates them. That's what makes them different. Then, if you're going to say that there are two separate gods, there has to be at least one quality that one has that the other doesn't. If one of them has it and the other one doesn't, that automatically makes one of them a god and the other one is not a god anymore. That's the only way you can differentiate two different gods. The minute you've differentiated it, then it's not a god anymore. They're not all powerful. The one that doesn't have the quality, it's not all powerful or not all knowledgeable or not unlimited. That means that there's one limitation that lowercase god would have, that the second one would have. So if, let's say, God A has this special quality of, A plus, 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 whatever, which makes it different than God B, which doesn't have it, this now means that this God is the more powerful one, which means now God B is the less powerful one, and therefore is not a God, because God B is not all powerful, not all knowledgeable, and not unlimited. This God B would be limited by this special quality here that God A has. I know it was a little philosophical, but again, this is how we have to respond to these sort of objections. So hopefully this was understood, inshallah. If you can please recite as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
You can imagine, I've tried to explain this before in different lectures, but I usually don't have a whiteboard, right, to help out. So you can imagine an audience trying to understand what I'm saying without a whiteboard. So you all are very, very lucky in that sense. Okay, let's go to our next point then. Okay. So this pretty much dispels the myth of polytheism. You can't have more than one ultimate God or unlimited God. It's not going to happen. There's only one being which can possess unlimited perfect qualities. That was our proof there, and we described it in different ways. Now, our second and final discussion, which we'll end on before we go on to our Masa'ib tonight, is about the practical value of Tawheed, or the practical application of Tawheed. And this one is, I think this is what ties in our discussion together. Let's look at this narration first from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Here the Prophet saying, Khairul ibada qawlu la ilaha illallah. The best worship is the saying or saying out loud what? La ilaha illallah. That there is no God but Allah. Now, it's a wonderful statement that it's the greatest form of worship we can do. But haven't pretty much all Muslims said this same statement? Isn't that one of the first things we ever say? The enemies of the Ahlul Bayt who dared fight against Imam Hussein and his family and his friends, weren't they ones who repeated La ilaha illallah multiple times? Does that make them those who perform the greatest ibadah? What about these modern day extremist, disgusting movements like Al-Qaeda or ISIS or any of these other groups like the Taliban? They say La ilaha illallah, Wahhabis and Salafis, etc. They do this. Does that make it the greatest worship? We see the sort of other actions they perform, the sort of beliefs that they hold. We would never want to associate with people like that. Right? The Khawarij, right, in history is another example. You see that it's not just about the statement itself. It's not just believing that God is one. There's something else that should cause a transformation in somebody's actions. Let's look at another narration. I'll skip the Arabic because of lack of time, because we started a little bit late, so I want to move on to the Masa'ib, inshallah. So I'll go right to the English here. And in this narration, which comes from the fifth Imam, he says that there's nothing with a greater reward than professing and bearing witness that there is no God but Allah. So far, pretty much the same thing that the Prophet said. But then he adds in something else. He's like, why is this so great? It's because of the fact that nothing parallels Allah, nor does anything or anyone associate him in any affair. So it seems that the fifth Imam is tying in these ideas here. The idea of prioritization or priorities and association. Take this back to our discussion of Tawheed. What sometimes you and I do is, right, although we have this idea of God, right, on one level, conceptually, we put next to it other things, right? Sometimes that might be science. Sometimes it might be our own logic. Sometimes it might be our own desires. Sometimes it might be culture. What we end up doing, sorry for the bad handwriting, what we might be doing is, na'udhu billah, putting things next to God. When we say that, I believe in God, he has no partner, he has no equal. Well, then why is it when God tells us to do something, he gives us a rule, he gives us a principle, we decide to follow our own whims and desires? We desire to follow our culture instead. We decide to follow our own rationality instead. We decide to go to some scientific idea instead. Assuming there is some sort of clash there, of course, as we discussed. This shows the weakness in our understanding of Tawheed. So when we say La ilaha illallah, it's not simply about there is only one God. It's not simply that there is no God but Allah, but a more practical way of trying to understand this and apply it in our life is that there is no priority and there is no authority except for Allah. When I am stuck at a crossroads, when I can make two separate decisions here, one of them will be the godly decision, the one that Allah is pleased with, and the other one will be, of course, anything else, right? It's something that God is not pleased with. This is where the identity crisis takes place. This is where we need to figure out who really do I give priority to? Is it God or not? Our job here is to make sure when we constantly say La ilaha illallah, when we constantly think about Allah's power, his presence, the gifts and blessings that he's given in our life, it's so that when we know when we're stuck at that crossroads, the same way Hur was about to make a decision, he decided, I'm going to do what pleases Allah and go towards those who please Allah, the Ahlul Bayt. Whereas Umar ibn Sa'ad on the other side says, I know that if I go after the Prophet's grandson, I'll go to hell, but I prefer the dunya instead. You see two conflicting, contrasting personalities in Karbala itself, Hur and Umar ibn Sa'ad. Both of them recognized one way was the divine way and one way was the satanic way, the nafsani, the egotistical way. One way was towards the afterlife and one way was towards egotistical material life. And they both made their choices. And now you see how their names have reverberated throughout history. This is the same idea and crisis that you and I face every single day. And it manifests in many different ways, right? The question of identity boils down to that first letter. The first letter of identity is what? It's I. That's where all these problems start. When I say it's I have an idea, I have an opinion, I think this, I want that. That ego is that thing which takes us away from God. It's the same thing that also messed up Shaitan as well, right? When Allah asked him, why didn't you bow down to Adam, alayhi salam? He says, Ana khayrun minhu. I am better than him. He identified his ego and distanced himself from God. He gave himself and disconnected himself from what God commanded and thought he could rationalize his own ideas. This is what you and I need to be careful of, especially within religious discourses. Think of all the different examples, right? Where we talk about, for example, unified Eid prayers when it comes to, let's say, the month of Ramadan, right? Famous example that happens every year. Many argue that, why do we have different days? Why can't the Maraji agree, etc.? We should just have one unified Eid prayer, right? I think we should have a unified Eid prayer. It's my opinion that we should do this. We say, look, it's great that you have an opinion, but why is it only within the religion of Islam that people think that without doing any real research, without being an expert, without actually knowing Arabic or studying theology or legal theory or usul al-fiqh or Arabic or logic or philosophy, why without spending so much time in the hawza does everybody feel like they have the right to start giving their own ideas and opinions? Now, don't get me wrong, it's okay to question, it's okay to be curious and inquisitive, that's wonderful. It's a whole other thing to say, we need to do this, the Maraja don't know what they're talking about, we need somebody like this. Where are you getting such arrogance from? This arrogance comes from the ego, thinking that you and I, without doing any sort of research, without thinking properly about these ideas, we can just come up with Islam as we want. We can build it as we want. We would never do this in any other field. When you take your car to a mechanic, you expect them to tell you what's wrong with the car. If you say, I think it's my alternator that's the problem. The mechanic will say, look, I'm telling you what the problem is. Why are you telling me? If you knew what the problem is, then you take care of it yourself. Why'd you bring it to me? We always know that there are experts in any field. Nobody would ever start randomly discussing over dinner, hey, what's your theory about the nature of black holes and white holes? No, we leave that to Stephen Hawking and other astrophysicists. We let them hash it out. But why is it all of a sudden, when it comes to religious discourse, we think that it's egalitarian, that everybody's allowed to have an opinion and it's equal to somebody who spent 20, 30, 40, 50 years, their whole life in an institution where they're dedicating themselves to studying every aspect of being. This is somehow, for some reason, this is the only discipline where we see everybody wants to have their say, and they think that they're equivalent to those who are experts in the religion. This is something that, brothers and sisters, please, we need to be careful of. Again, I want to be clear. We're not saying that you can't question. We're not saying that you can't be inquisitive, but there's some humility that should go along with it. And definitely, I will fault some of our scholars. I'm not going to discount that as well. Some of our scholars have not educated our communities, and that's why they haven't been able to engage in discourse. I will definitely put the blame more so on the scholars and institutions than I would the community members. Definitely, I will defend you in that sense. So what we need to do then is move towards a place where we're becoming more educated. If you want to question things about moon sighting, why is this kind of music haram? Why is chess haram according to this? Why are the difference of opinion? No problem. Let's sit down, be ready to go through workshops, be ready to sit down in a seminar, do the research, do the reading, hash it out, and engage. That's fine. But just don't think that one little article on alislam.org is going to make you an expert. Don't think that, going back and forth on social media is something that you're allowed to do. In fact, I would never invite anybody to engage on these sort of, arguments on social media when they don't have the knowledge base to be able to engage in that. In our narrations, it says that this is something that'll destroy your soul. It'll destroy your heart. The Prophet has said that engaging in debate is not a good thing. So we have to be very, very careful that we're not damaging our soul. So when we want to take La ilaha illallah and apply it practically, we say, look, God is the ultimate authority. He is the priority of my life. When I'm stuck at a crossroads, I remember that, God is the one who makes decisions, not me. Whenever I'm about to say something, I stop and think about God first. Okay, do I really know what God wants? If not, then I need to research. Maybe I even need to be precautious. I should be practicing ihtiyat first before I start opening my mouth and saying something that I might regret later on. So hopefully, mu'mineen, mu'minat, we take this idea of tawheed, we implement it in a way that it humbles us. It recognizes, and we help recognize that God is the one in charge of everything. And only the representatives of God, are the ones who have the ability to decide what is right, what is wrong, what is Islamic, and what is un-Islamic. So hopefully we keep this in mind. The next question then we're going to start to answer from tomorrow night onwards is about this. Once we've proven that God exists, which we've done, that there's only one God, how do we know that this God is actually just? We see so much evil in the world. How can we believe that there's a good, merciful God? And if this God is not good and merciful, then why would you and I bother obeying him? And especially for those of us who are believers, why do we see good things happening to bad people and bad things happening to good people. So this, inshallah, over the next few nights, we'll begin to examine, inshallah. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Tonight, we are honoring arguably one of the greatest companions, the greatest lovers, the greatest followers, and the greatest personalities that was present in Karbala. And it's funny, most mu'mineen, mu'minat, I think they're hard to wait for this night. Now, we have love for everybody, of course, but there seems to be something very special about Abu Fadl al-Abbas, especially related to this topic, because we see that Abbas is somebody who we describe by his character, the fact that he was the loyal one, right? He had a wafa, ba wafa, we say, right? Ba wafa. Even Yazid, this disgusting individual, was able to recognize that quality, right? We see, according to the historians, that when the caravan arrived in Syria, in Sham, Yazid was examining all the different items that was in possession with the Ahlul Bayt. He saw one very large flag, an alam, and he asked everybody, whose flag is this? Whose alam is this? He was told that this belongs to Abbas ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. And he said, again, somebody like Yazid, a cursed, depraved, disgusting individual. He got up, he looked at it, he sat back down. He was mesmerized by it. He said, look at this flag. Look at the flagpole. He said, you see it completely damaged from top to bottom, except right here towards the end. Why? He said, because this is the place where Abbas's hand was. Meaning, Abbas never let it go. His hand was there holding on to it. His identity was so strong, and he held it there so much that that part of the flagpole, the staff, looked like it was brand new. And Yazid even said, I wish I had even one soldier in my army like this, like Abbas, somebody who is this loyal, this steadfast. This is what it means to have a tawheedi, God-centric identity. That even when you're being struck down, when you're in front of an army of enemies, then you still hold on to the religion. And this is something that you and I we can take a lesson from our beloved Abu Fadl al-Abbas. There's a lot to be said about this personality, but let's move on now to the night or the day where we see they go out. One by one, the companions are leaving. The family of the Ahlul Bayt, they're going out and giving up their lives. Abbas keeps coming and saying, Ya Mawla, Ya Hussein, please let me go out and let me fight. But every time he comes, Hussein says, Ya Abbas, you are the alamdar. You are the flag bearer. You're the commander. You're the amir. If you go, then the women will lose hope. Everybody else will lose their morality, their morale. I can't let you go there. Abbas would keep coming back over and over again until one point, Abbas comes and asks again. Hussein says, Abbas, I've answered you before. You are the amir, you're the commander. I can't let you go. And narrations say that Abbas then says, Ya Mawla, Ya Hussein, look around. There's nobody here for me to command anymore. There's nobody left in our army. Who am I here to command? Please let me go out. And this is where Hussein says, I give you now only one reason to go out, and that's if you can go grab some water for these thirsty children. Now, I don't know what Abbas was thinking in his heart when he goes and he says his salams to everybody as he gets ready to go. When he gives that final hug to Ruqayya, to Sakina before he leaves. And as he goes off on his horse, as they say, without a sword, because his job was not to fight, but his job was to get water. They say that Sakina now is gathering all the children and saying, guess what? Ammu Abbas is going out and getting us water. They're saying that the Qamar, the moon of Banu Hashim, the support of the Banu Hashim is going out. All the children, everybody's expecting him to return with water. I don't know what was in Abbas's heart. I don't know what was in Sakina's heart. But imagine the hope that was in there when she saw the flag going down towards the Euphrates. In a distance, she's watching from the tents. She's saying, aha, that means my Ammu Abbas, my uncle, has reached the Euphrates. He's getting us water now. She sees the flag go up again. That means, hey, look, he's telling all her cousins and everybody, he's got back up on his horse. He's coming back. Do you see the flag? In a distance, he's coming closer and closer to us. And as you're coming, you see the flag going up and down, but it's getting closer and closer. They're saying, Abbas is coming. Ammu Abbas is coming. But we know what's happening on the other side of the battlefield. As he's going closer and closer with that canteen of water, he's being struck from all sides. They say his limbs were being cut and cut off. He had arrows in one of his eyes, and Abbas now is unable to carry this. Some say that he was trying to carry the canteen in his mouth, but an arrow struck this canteen and the water began to pour out from there. You know, mu'mineen, mu'minat, one thing is very interesting. When Hussein ran towards the body of Abbas, you would expect Hussein to find the body of Abbas and then later on find his body parts laid somewhere else after, towards the river of Furat. But instead, the narrations say it was the other way around, that they saw as Hussein went towards Abbas, first he found one body part. He would go closer and find another body part. And then finally, he found the body of Abbas on the floor. This meant that after Abbas was attacked, he turned back and tried to go without any limbs back to the river of Euphrates to see if he could get water again. We would say, Abbas, you have no hands. You have no arms. You don't have a working canteen. Your eye is bloodied. You're blind now. What do you think you can do? But this is somebody who is Babafa, somebody who has loyalty, somebody who in his heart and his mind can only hear the cries of the children saying, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. Now Hussein is at the body of his brother Abbas. He gives him his final requests and he mentions a few different things. But the one thing that I think broke our hearts when we heard it, the one thing that broke the heart of Hussein when he heard it, he's like, Ya Akhi, Ya Abbas, what is your request? He says, Ya Hussein, Ya Akhi, my brother, I have one special request from you. What is it? What do you want from me? He says, please leave my body right here on the battlefield and do not take it back to the tents. He said, Ya Abbas, why don't you want me to take it back? He says, because I'm ashamed to go back to Sakina because I had promised to bring her water. I don't want to break her heart when I go back there. And they say this was one of the only bodies which was left on the battlefield. When Hussein comes back without the body of Abbas, Sakina's looking, Aina Ammu Abbas? Where's my uncle Abbas? Hussein has nothing left to say. Then Sakina says to her father, Baba, if I stop asking for water, will Ammu Abbas come back? ولا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلمون الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. Ya Allah, by the right of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, by the right of the Wafa of Abu Fadl Abbas, forgive all mu'mineen, mu'minat, muslimeen, muslimat. Help us gain that strength and identity, that loyalty that Abu Fadl Abbas had as mu'mineen, mu'minat. As parents, let us ingrain that teaching and that character and the personality of Abu Fadl Abbas into our children. Ya Allah, make us those who will have that same characteristics so we can impart these teachings to all those around us, inshallah. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ahli bayti at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Matam Hussein.
पानी मांगे न कोई रोके सकीना बोली पानी मांगे न कोई रोके सकीना बोली पास बाबा के मेरे दूसरा बास नहीं पानी मांगे न कोई इल्तिजा है ये मेरी कोई प्यासा ना करे शिकवाए तशना लबी पास बाबा के मेरे दूसरा बास नहीं पानी मांगे न कोई मेरे बाबा से इन्हें दूर हटा दो बच्चों खाली कूजों को कहीं जाके छुपा दो बच्चों देख कर खुश्क इन्हें होना महसूस कहीं अपने भाई की कमी पास बाबा के मेरे दूसरा बास नहीं पानी मांगे न कोई रोके सकीना बोली पास बाबा के मेरे दूसरा बास नहीं पानी मांगे न कोई काश पानी के लिए उनसे न कहती आकर क्या खबर थी कि नहीं आएंगे अम्मू जाकर शर्म आती है मुझे देख कर टूटी कमर جان نکلتی ہے میری پاس بابا کے میرے دوسرا باس نہیں پانی مانگے نہ کوئی مجھ کو احساس نہ ہو اپنے چچا کے غم کا اس لیے روتے نہیں سامنے میرے بابا جانتی ہوں میں مگر کہ میرے بابا پر کیا قیامت گزری پاس بابا کے میرے دوسرا باس نہیں پانی مانگے نہ کوئی رو کے سکینہ بولی پاس بابا کے میرے دوسرا باس نہیں پانی مانگے نہ کوئی دیکھ حلمن کی صدا دشت سے آئی اصغر اتنا احسان تو کر بہن پہ بھائی اصغر اٹھ جا بے شیر میرے باندھ لے سر سے کفن اب ضرورت ہے تیری پاس بابا کے میرے دوسرا باس نہیں پانی مانگے نہ کوئی رو کے سکینہ بولی پاس بابا کے میرے دوسرا باس نہیں پانی مانگے نہ کوئی جس سے ڈھارس تھی تجھے کٹ گئے بازو اس کے تیر و تلوار ہے اور تنہا ہے بابا تیرے آنا مشکل ہے وطن کوئی امید نہیں کہہ دے صغرا سے کوئی پاس بابا کے میرے دوسرا باس نہیں پانی مانگے نہ کوئی رو کے سکینہ بولی پاس بابا کے میرے دوسرا باس نہیں پانی مانگے نہ کوئی کربلا کانپ گئی کیسی تکلم کی گھڑی دیکھتی تھی وہ کبھی باپ کو دریا کو کبھی شہ پہ چلتی تھی چھری بچی یہ کہتی ہوئی خاک پر بیٹھ گئی پاس بابا کے میرے دوسرا باس نہیں پانی مانگے نہ کوئی رو کے سکینہ بولی پاس بابا کے میرے دوسرا باس نہیں پانی مانگے نہ کوئی یا حسین یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین دست ساقی من شد ز بازو قلم گشت نقش زمین یاورم با علم ساقی کودکان داده لب چشم جان ساقی کودکان داده لب چشم جان چون علمدار من در یم خون نشست داغ جان سوز او کمرم را شکست ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان قطعه قطعه شده پیکر صف شکن گشته در خاک و خون غوطه بر ماه من ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان آمده از جنان مادرم فاطمه تا به غمه ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان مادرم از وفا سوگواری کند از جگر ناله با اشک جاری کند ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان دست سقای من شد ز بازو قلم گشت نقش زمین یاورم با علم ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان چون علمدار من در یم خون نشست داغ جان سوز او کمرم را شکست ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان قطعه قطعه شده پیکر صف شکن گشته در خاک و خون غوطه بر ماه من ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان آمده از جنان مادرم فاطمه تا ببیند چه رخ داده در القمه ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان مادرم از وفا سوگواری کند از جگر ناله با اشک جاری کند ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان ساقی کودکان داده لب تشنه جان
وحسين 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 يا جريح يا قتيل كربلاء وحسين وحسين يا شهيد كربلاء يا جريح كربلاء يا غريب كربلاء يا عطشان كربلاء تحضر الزهر الزكية وتجري دمع العين بكل عزة تنادي وسبية وين ابن حسين شاوين تحضر الزهر الزكية وتجري دمع العين بكل عزاء تنادي بكل عزاء تنادي وسبيع حسين يا ابن حسين حسين يا ابن حسين يا غريب كربلاء يا شهيد كربلاء يا ذبيح كربلاء بكل عزاء وكل مصيب تحضري الزهرة الزكية بكل عزاء وكل مصيبة تحضري الزهرة الزكية ومن قلب شاعر الهيبة نوح بالحصرة الزكية عالغريب وعالغريب عالغريب وعالغريب تجذبي الحاب العبرة الزكية على الغريب وعلى الغريبة، وتجذب العبرة الزكية بكل كتر بكل كتر تنصب عزية، بكل كتر تلطم عزية وتلطم الخدين فاطم. يا حسين يا غريب، يا حسين يا ذبيح، يا حسين يا غريب، يا حسين يا ذبيح، يا حسين يا غريب. نذكر مصاب ابو اليمه ومحنته عياله، ومذبحه وجروان دمه وغربته واطفاله، يعز عليها خضار جسمه وعطش دلاله. البين والله يا حسين حضرته بالغاضرية، يا حسين من اللي فاه البين والله يا حسين تحضر الزهرة الزكية وتجري دمع العين. بكل عزاء بكل عزاء تلطم الزهرة، بكل عزاء تنادي وسبية حسين يا ابني ويل، حسين يا ابني ويل. يا غريب كربلاء، يا قتيل كربلاء، يا عطشان كربلاء، يا غريب كربلاء. وين اخويا حسين وين، وين اخويا حسين وين، زينب تنادي. وين اخويا حسين وين، زينب تنادي. والخيل سحقت صدره، والخيل سحقت صدره. وين اخويا، وين اخويا حسين وين، على الغريب اليوم ابكي، على الغريب اليوم ابكي، على الغريب اليوم ابكي. يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا غريب كربلاء، يا حسين يا غريب كربلاء. الله
محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين، إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Brothers and sisters, it's time for the adhan for Maghrib.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أشهد أن مولانا أمير المؤمنين عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن مولانا أمير المؤمنين عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك، لا إله إلا أنت، أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إنه ليس لي علم بموضع رزقي، وإنما أطلبه بخطرات تخطر على قلبي، فأجول في طلبه البلدان، فأنا فيما أنا طالب كالحيران، لا أدري أفي سهل هو أم في جبل، أم في أرض أم في سماء، أم في بر أم في بحر، وعلى يدي من ومن قبلي من، وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك، وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم فصل على محمد وآله، واجعل يا ربي رزقك لي واسعا، ومطلبه سهلا، ومأخذه قريبا، ولا تعنني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا، فإنك غني عن عذابي، وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك. فصل على محمد وآله، وجد على عبدك بفضلك، إنك ذو فضل عظيم. وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all praise belongs to you, our Lord, Lord of the worlds. We ask you to increase your peace and blessings upon our Prophet and upon his family and friends millions of times. O Lord, despite this great storm, we thank you for the much needed slowdown. We thank you for the chance to take stock of our lives and finally attend to matters that we had delayed for so long. And we thank you for the newfound appreciation we have for your infinite blessings. O Lord, though we are grateful, we feel like powerless ships drifting into uncharted waters. Borders are closed and planes are grounded. Shops are shuttered and town centers are deserted. Our livelihoods have diminished and we can no longer spend or consume as we like. We can't even leave our homes to visit loved ones, some of whom we may never see again. Your houses are closed and there is no pilgrimage. O Lord, none of us know where all of this is heading, and so we turn to you, admitting our helplessness and fear. We beg you to help us weather this storm in the best of ways, and to please grant us all the good that it contains, and all the good that hides behind it, and to make the journey as smooth as possible. Multiply our positivity and resilience, help us be proactive and productive, and inspire us with creative solutions to the extraordinary challenges we face. Fill us with patience and self-control, gratitude and generosity, and deep compassion towards one another. Fill our homes and neighborhoods with peace, happiness, and grace, and make this the means of unity that humanity so desperately needs. Help us keep our bodies, souls, and minds as fit and healthy as possible. Protect us from infection and from any other illness or accident that would need medical help. Protect us from debt, unemployment, and bankruptcy. And protect us from the many other harms that this storm contains, and the harms which hide behind it. And whatever challenges you may place ahead of us, help us to overcome them and give us trust in your wisdom. O Lord, though we don't know where our ships will land, We ask you to help us exit from this storm better, stronger, and closer to you than when it began, and that you navigate us to a new normal that is far better than the one we left behind, and that you never allow us to forget the lessons we learned along the way. O Lord, grant all of this not just to us, but to our loved ones, our neighbors, our friends, our brothers and sisters throughout the world, and all humanity. O Lord, grant a fast recovery to those who are ill and a safe return to loved ones kept apart. Take special care of the old and vulnerable and those who are mentally unwell. Grant a special solace to those who are living alone, those who are dying alone, and those whose loved ones pass away. Grant a special patience to young children and the adults who are raising them, and grant a special mercy to those who are now locked up with mean, selfish, or abusive people. Grant a special grace to the frontline workers and volunteers upon whom so many depend, especially those who risk their own health to care for ours. And grant a special aid to the needy, to those with few resources, to those struggling to make ends meet, to those working under great pressure, and to those who are striving to make the world a better place. And we especially ask you to please compel our leaders to do what's best for us all. O Lord, you've promised to answer our calls, and you never break your promises, and you are the most generous of those who show generosity. So please answer our call in the most generous of ways, and keep us consistent in making it until we reach safety. And in closing, we ask you to increase your peace and blessings upon our Prophet and upon his family and friends millions of times, and all praise belongs to you. Ameen.
أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء 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 أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا نبي الله. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا محمد بن عبد الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى ابن عمك أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب وصي رسول رب العالمين. السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى بضعتك الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى زوجتك الوفية الغراء خديجة الكبرى أم المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى ولديك الإمامين الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى أئمة المسلمين من ذرية ولدك الحسين علي السجاد ومحمد الباقر وجعفر الصادق وموسى الكاظم وعلي الرضا ومحمد الجواد وعلي الهادي والحسن العسكري والحجة بن الحسن المهدي. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا الله من أنصارك وأعوانك والمستشهدين بين يديك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
Brothers and sisters, let us remember all the marhumeens in our respective families and friends and neighbors who are no longer with us with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. This brings us to the close of our program tonight. I thank you all for joining. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow, the 8th of Muharram, the evening of 9th of Muharram. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Fi amanillah, Khuda Hafiz, Kwahiri, Achija, Aujo.